invocation, and our administrator, David Cadell, is going to lead that, and it'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone will please stand.
Let us pray. Lord, as council begins consideration of issues to focus on over the next several years, I pray for your guidance. I pray that you lead us into serving the citizens of Edgefield County well. Give each of us a servant's heart, Lord. God, none of us have all the answers, and we disagree from time to time. That's okay. You created us as beautifully different people, and yet we're all alike in your image. So I pray for a spirit of cooperation and understanding. I pray for wisdom and discernment, Lord, as we tackle the tough issues, and that any decisions that we make honor you. And my loving God, I pray for humility, above all else, humility. In his holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to open, before I turn this over to Roger LeDuc, who's going to lead our retreat, I want to say a couple things. One, there is no public comment section here, and that's deliberate. We want to make sure that, there has to be time for council to talk. There has to be time for us to plan. There has to be time for us to be able to understand what we all see as the most important things, because what comes out of this will be things people want to comment on. And we've been taking public comment on what they'd be interested in, the public, for the past month plus. So all that said, I just wanted to explain that. Now, that's not to say if something comes up, we might not ask somebody in the audience a question, and we might. Just depends on what it might be. So with that, I did want to open with a couple of things so everybody sort of be on the same page. First, most of council has not had the chance to participate in a county council retreat that leads to a strategic plan. As a matter of fact, I think probably Mr. Talbot and I are the only two that are currently on council that have done that. So I want to give you a quick, broad overview before I turn it over to Roger to lead us through it. First, I will say, and everybody knows this, Roger is a very nice man. But he will keep this process moving along, and he has to keep this process moving along. We have a lot to cover tonight, and we can't get bogged down in one area. Remember, we are not here tonight to solve issues that will come up. Tonight is about identifying a path forward on many topics that we all think are important. Think of it this way. Tonight is just the beginning. It's not the end. Between tonight's session and our joint meeting with the Planning Commission in 2 weeks, we will have given staff a good set of data to put together a useful strategic plan. A strategic plan helps our staff and the public understand what our priorities are. Also, I want to point out that the strategic plan doesn't cover and won't cover every possible thing or decision we can make. It generally covers big items and the most impactful for our citizens. For example, if we decide economic development is a category to put into the strategic plan, we couldn't possibly put every element of economic development into it. But it would cover what we see today as the meaningful work we need to undertake in that area. But as new items come up in that area, we would certainly address them no matter what the strategic plan said. We'll also discuss in future meetings many items that are important and will be taken up as they arise, but they won't be in the strategic plan. For example, the strategic plan isn't going to say we need to appoint good people to our boards and commissions, because we already know that, and we do that as a routine matter. Finally, I'll add that we've had citizen input for over a month into this process that the administrator has collected, and we're working into that plan at the appropriate places. He also received input from elected officials, department heads, and county employees as well. All the input and discussion will produce a robust and comprehensive strategic plan. So before I turn the floor over to Roger for council. Are there any questions on what I've just discussed? Everybody okay? All right, then Roger Leduc, our former interim administrator, is going to lead us through this. So Roger, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hope everybody had a good Christmas, good New Year. And it's good to be back with you all, even in this different position. Tonight, as the chairman stated, we're going to go ahead and talk about 9 broad topics. Again, this is not, it's so easy when you're doing this to start saying, well, we could do this, and we could do that. And if we start getting into we could do or what the problem is, we're never going to get through this whole process. So I'm going to be, I do have a mean streak in me at times. And I'm going to probably bring it out tonight in the fact that some of these topics we'll talk about maybe about 3 minutes. Others we might go 7 or 8 minutes. But after a point, I'll just say, okay, we need to move on. Once we go through those 9 topics, we'll take a short break. Then we'll come back here after about 10 or 15 minutes, and it'll allow you to ask some further questions, maybe make some other comments. And then at the very end, we're going to go ahead, and I have listed all 9 topics, and we're going to ask each of you to say, okay, what are your top topics? And you can't take all 9 of them and say, every one of them is my top topic. So I'm going to probably say you each get about 3 votes in your top one, about 3 votes on your medium, and 3 on the lowest one, so we at least get some consensus. And why are we doing that? I've often told you, and David and I had the same conversation, that the administrator has 3 major roles. Number 1 role is to serve the citizens. The administrator gets calls on a regular basis. People come into his office. You bring in constituents' concerns, and you present those to David. He goes ahead and works with those citizens or works with the various departments and gets back to them to resolve those problems. That's one of his jobs, is working with the citizens. Number 2, he works with the staff. Very critical. As I told David on many occasions, no offense, but you don't make anything. You don't go out there and you're not resuscitating people or going out there and solving crime issues or dog issues or anything else. You're there just to support the staff. And so your job is to serve the staff on a day-to-day basis and to give them the tools that they need so they could go out and do the job that county council wants. So that's his second role. The third role is to work with council, putting together an agenda once a month. That takes, some months it takes numerous hours, other months it doesn't take quite as much time. But to resolve the bigger issues, to look into the larger issues, and to hopefully serve you and the needs that you have. To do that, and again, I've been doing this for a couple of decades, an administrator could handle probably about 3 major issues a year. And then there's some other minor ones that they might be able to do. But once beyond that, it's kind of like the person in the circus. Have you ever seen them spinning plates? And he spins another plate, and spins another plate, and spins another one. And eventually, the one that he started with starts wobbling and gets ready to fall off. And he has to go back there again. And so there's only so many plates you could spin. There's only so many balls you could toss up without things falling apart. And so, give you an example, in 2021, 3 major issues. Came in here on April 1st. It wasn't April Fool's Day either, but this place was packed. People were standing up, sitting on the floor, talking about moratoriums and talking about development. And it was a big, big issue. So in 2021, we worked on comprehensive plan. We worked on zoning. We got started with a law enforcement center, hiring the architect, getting the land, doing the environmental studies, getting that nonprofit started. Those are the 3 major issues. Along the way, we did some other things, started a classification study, worked with the sheriff to go ahead and get some raises and with EMS and do those kind of things. But 3 major issues we worked on, and they were big issues. By the end of that 6-month period of time, there wasn't nearly as much, I'll call it angst, that was going on in the county. And at one point, there was a lot of it because there was a lot of concerns because people didn't feel like they were really being listened to. 2021 or 2022, this year that we're in, again, we did redistricting. Now, for a lot of people that didn't get involved in this, it didn't seem like that big of an issue, but I spent time with council members, talked to some citizens, and spent a lot of hours trying to reshape, and get the numbers and percentages that we were looking for. Again, the law enforcement center, lots of time with the architect, lots of time with the sheriff, lots of time with items and getting our loans put together, getting everything set up. The animal shelter, another major item. In between, then we hired an IT person, we finished the classification study, and there was, for some of you, it might have been other issues involved, but again, about 3 major issues that we were able to handle. Oh, and then there was the radios and the communication system. And again, not everything, the administrator's doing all these things, like Doc did some things, the sheriff did some things, Garrett did some things with EMS, and so we had various people helping along the way. But again, the administrator needs to make sure that these things are getting done in a timely manner. So tonight, that's why I'm stating that when we start looking at what are the things that you want accomplished in the next 6 to 9 months, it's going to be about 3. You might be able to get a few other little things done, but really concentrate to get these things done. I want David's health to still be so he doesn't turn all gray by the end of the year. He might, but to be reasonable in working with him, and I know he'll do a good job in getting those things done. So let me go ahead and start with just a very little bit of a primer on budgeting. It's not one of the topics, but I think it's the budget. To me, it's like the Bible in that it sets everything at the foundation of what gets done. Most of the departments are under what we call general fund. And then there's a couple of them that are under other funds, other major ones. That'd be like EMS. There's a millage that we have on the tax bill to help pay for EMS. The road crews, there's the fees that are on vehicles, and that's at $30. And then there's solid waste, where every housing unit has to pay $100 per unit for solid waste, the convenience centers that we have. There's some other ones that we have, like with the SROs, the Sheriff's Resource Officers, that there's general funding through the state or through other entities. But everything else, we have the general fund. And when we look at, so we get a report, looks like this. It's called a census report. You all get it. This report tells you what the housing is like and the other development. This past year, if we take off the sheriff's building, we had about $88 million in new development. In the previous years, 2 years ago, it was $59 million, then it went up to 65. This year was 88. But when I looked at the last 4 months of the year, they compared very favorable to 2020 and 2021. And in talking to Doc, we see that trend probably continuing. We don't see the massive growth because the interest rates are going up. But when you take about $60 to $70 million of new development, that equates, because again, most of it's at 4% taxes. We have about 82 mills. That equates to about $3,200 per $1 million. Or if I multiply that all out, it comes up to around $200,000 in new revenue that we're bringing in because of the growth. Now that sounds wonderful, but it also equates to about a 2.5% to 3% pay increase for all the employees. So all this growth that we're having is wiped out just by a pay increase, and that doesn't take care of all the other things that are going up in prices. So it's a fine balancing act as an administrator to meet the needs of the employees, but also to meet the needs of the citizens on a finite amount of money. So as we talk about these subjects, it's very easy to say, well, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and do this. And we have to always know that we have a finite amount of money available, and we always have to look at where's the new money going to come from. And I could pretty much tell you right now, more than likely, you're not going to want to raise taxes. You're not going to want to increase user fees. We haven't done that in a long time, and we're probably not going to do that. And especially with a new administrator, that's the last thing he wants to do. So we have a constraint of how much money we're bringing in, and therefore, how much are we going to spend? We just can't, we really don't want to start digging into the reserves more than we have to. Okay? So let me go ahead and, these are the 10 and 9 subjects that we're going to be talking about. And let me start with the county buildings. And we wanted to start there. We have essentially 4 buildings. We got the jail, the sheriff's offices. We got where the judge was at between the courthouse and the pool room, that building. We got the magistrate's office. Those things are all going to be available fairly soon. And so we have to make some decisions. Doesn't have to be this year, but sometime in the next couple of years, what's going to happen with these vacant buildings? We always need places for storage, but we do have the big storage unit that's next to the Nice building, that if it's divided off, and we could even go ahead and make it climate control, that building could be used for a number of things. But one of the things, and the reason I bring this up, is this building here, you authorized in the last budget to purchase this building. And we're working on that. David's working on that. And I would say that if it comes in at the right price, we need to purchase it. But if it doesn't, we may want to take that money and put it into the magistrate's building and really make that what you want. Not to say this is what you want, but it's kind of like starting with a blank plate here, or canvas that you would have. Well, what's going to happen with the jail? What's going to happen with the sheriff's office? I think if you ask the sheriff right now, as far as he's concerned, it could implode and it would probably be good for the county. But it's because it's not in very good shape. But again, it's not going to get in any better shape if something's not done with it. And it costs a lot of money to go ahead and tear down buildings because of asbestos at this point in time. But that is an issue that we'll need to be talking more about in the coming months and in the coming years, because it's about 18 months from the time we started construction in November to completion on the law enforcement center. Any questions? Okay, moving right along. Development. In this case, we're talking primarily residential development. Could be residential, it could be commercial. First of all, where's that development at? I would say that 90% of it, at least 80 to 90% of it, is along US 25 and Sweetwater, which that's fine, but it causes some issues that we are going to then be talking about later on in our discussion. Those issues are more and more incidents the sheriff has to go down to. Garrett, more and more EMS is needed in that area. Now, we do have an ambulance station down there, but if all of that growth, and again, we're talking about a couple of hundred new homes are pretty much in the Sweetwater area along 25, that puts more and more pressure not only on us, the sheriff, EMS, but the schools. Now, something that is a number of counties have done in the past, a number of cities have done in the past, state law says you have to be very specific how it's instituted, but a number of them have instituted user fees. Ridgeland and Beaufort were the 2 counties that started this back in the 90s. Because there were so many people moving in that area, for the Hilton Head area, in Hardeeville, and Ridgeland area, that they said, we're not, all these new people, we can't keep up with our schools, and paying for new schools. We can't keep up with ambulances and sheriff's vehicles and other buildings that we needed. And so they started instituting a user fee on new residents or new homes. This is done very frequently with a lot of cities on water and sewer. But it's something that we may want to consider so that the burden is not on existing Edgefield residents, but put a little bit more burden on those that come into our county. How that's done, it's put as a fee when they come in to get a building permit for a new home, they may pay $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 as a developer's fee to go ahead and help cover some of these other charges. And therefore, instead of the home being $197,000, they would pay $200,000 for that home. And that's how that fee, again, it has to be worded just the right way, but it's something to consider in the future as to how do we pay for some of the infrastructure that's going to be needed to support all that growth. Now, if that growth was spread out throughout the county, it'd be a little bit different. But I know for two towns that I work with, there just is not residential development happening. I'm sure it's the same thing in Johnston, and I know on the north side, the west side, you know, you got a few houses being built, but again, the vast majority is in the Sweetwater and US 25 area. And it's causing some issues that we, as a county, need to deal with and face in the upcoming future. Some of this we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from today, we'll be having the same meeting, except you all will be sitting down on the floor, not on the floor literally. You'll be sitting in chairs down here with the Planning Commission. We'll be in some kind of a U-shaped, and we'll sit down together jointly and talking to them. What are the 3 to 5 issues they need to be taking up in the near future, in 2023? Especially given the fact that we have this growth. You know, we're going to be looking at recreation, we're going to be looking at EMS and everything involved. So this is your chance to sit down with them and jointly say, let's together come up with these topics, and gives them a path forward. I used to do this every year when I worked with the city of Aiken, and it worked out real well for the Planning Commission. It worked out real well for the council. But we'll be sitting down with them and talking about that. The last thing I wanted to say about residential development, and this is something we started working on in 2021, was broadband. It's still being done. A number of people are now on broadband. Aiken Electric Cooperative, you know, you all got those maps that showed kind of like a big area of green, that's Aiken Electric Co-op, and then there was a kind of some white areas, that's where maybe Comcast or Vive is going to be in, and then there was an area that was Salmon, and that Salmon area was an area that no one was going to be taking care of. Now, I know in talking to Vive, talking to Comcast, they will go 500,000 feet beyond their area, but they're not planning on going half a mile into these areas. And so the co-op has asked the state for some money. The state has $400 million from the federal government to use for broadband. But broadband is an infrastructure that, in my opinion, is just as critical today as electric, water, and sewer. And if our county is going to grow, we need to keep in mind how important that broadband is. How we work with Aiken Electric Co-op or Vive or Comcast or AT&T, I really don't care who provides it. I think Aiken Electric Co-op is one that we've had a good partnership with. But the main thing is we need to go ahead and make sure everybody has that opportunity to have that broadband. Whether it's because of the school kids or whether it's going to be people staying at home and working from their home or industry or commercial or whatever it's going to be, we need broadband. And so that's, again, something in the future that the administrator, the planning commission, council needs to work towards, is making sure we have broadband. Any questions on residential development? Okay. The third area is economic development. Economic development is important from various standpoints. One, providing jobs. It's also, we have a higher tax amount. It's 6%. It used to be 10.5%, but the legislator has dropped that down, so we're not getting quite as much. We have a lot of fee in lieu of. Right now, County Council is going to be looking at what we call a multi-county park. It's a big park that's going to happen actually in Aiken County, but we'll get 1% of the taxes, and it's going to bring in over $40,000 in fees. We're getting right now about $60-some thousand in these multi-county parks with Aiken County. Part of that money goes to keep up our park, to pay for electricity, to pay up the maintenance, and we have a road there that needs to be dealt with and other infrastructure needs. Right now, we don't own the land that's there in the park. Right now, that land, if I recall, Mr. Chairman, Donnie Thompson and others own that land.
That's correct.
So it's for sale, and it's reserved. They can't do something with it without our permission. It's kind of an interesting agreement. It takes two of the three to go ahead and approve a land sale. One is the landowner. One is what used to be EDP, now it's Western South Carolina Economic Development Partnership. And the third one is the county council. So if Will Williams and his group, or we, along with Will, don't think that's best for the county, we could go ahead and nix the sale. So if something comes in there and we don't like it because it's not going to provide the jobs or the financial rewards we get from the revenue, then we could say no. And that's happened a couple of times. There is some land that's still available. There is a gentleman in our county that owns a couple of acres. Right now, it's a wooded section right along US 25. If you look in there deep enough, there's a abandoned home that's literally falling down. There's an old shed, used to sell peaches and other things right along the road. We may want to consider buying that. We may want to consider, there's been all kinds of talk. Should EMS have a station there? There should be a fire station? Should there be some kind of a fuel station for trucks to go ahead and fuel up at? So there's all kinds of possibilities, but again, the future of this county depends on economic development, both from jobs and from the revenue that we have. We were fortunate enough that last year we extended the road and we went ahead and put in the water lines. So we had that, but it's interesting. One of the things that several industries have come to us in the past and said, we need a lot of power, more electricity than what normally, and to bring power to some of these locations like that industrial park, you may have to go several miles across country to bring it there, and it's going to cost hundreds, if not millions of dollars to bring in some of this other things that they need. Some companies want rail service. And so we have looked in the past in Edgefield County at different places as where is there rail service? Our particular industrial park is all trucking. And it's in an ideal location because it could swing up and go down to mile marker 11, or it could go down to mile marker 5. For better or for worse, more and more trucks are getting off at mile marker 11 and going up Bettis Academy. That's a whole other issue. But industrial, where we go, what we need in the future is really a key towards what is Edgefield County going to look like a few years from now. And then, again, when you start looking at this, economic development, what you do today, you'll get your rewards 5 to 10 years from now. One of the things we did when I worked in Aiken is we prepped some sites. We actually went in there, graded it, put a pad out there so that sometimes developers have a hard time visualizing what would my site look like. It might be something we want to do. So there's a lot of different keys that we can look at. We could work with Will Williams, but economic development is, again, another key area for us to go ahead and keep at the forefront as we go forward. Comments, questions? It's almost too easy, David. No, it's going to stop. The county workforce, as I stated at the very beginning, the county workforce, without them, they're the key to everything. Just think if we didn't have the sheriff's department or if we didn't have EMS, what that would be like in the county. It'd be chaos. Currently, with the county workforce, like most other local governments, and I'm talking about all the counties here we have in South Carolina and then the different municipalities, back in the 90s and the 2000s, and then it pretty much ended in the 2010s, insurance has changed, benefits have changed. Used to be that most private companies, and then almost all governmental, they had a great benefit package. I know that as insurance kept going up and up and up, there was a tendency for most local governments to start charging more and more and more that the employee had to pay. In 2011, we sat down, Leanne and I, and looked at it, and we said, we got about 175 employees. We'll allow those employees to keep the same benefit package they have that are currently working with us. But any new employee, we're going to go ahead and they were going to pay $97 and some cents per month towards health insurance. And the reason we did this is we checked with the other counties, and we were one of a handful at that time that still did not have their employees paying any part of their health insurance. So we went ahead and made that change. I think right now we have 40-some employees that are still grandfathered and not having to pay anything. And then all the new employees are paying that $97. Just in the little town of Trenton, we just have a new police chief. And it used to be that the former police chief, same policy, they were not paying anything. And council said, no, the new one will be paying something. So they're now paying up to 25% of what that insurance was going to be. I don't know of another town or county that doesn't charge the employees something. But again, benefits are really critical to our employees. I think what I saw, again, last year we did the classification study. And that classification study, when we did it, we saw that a number of employees were undervalued from a financial standpoint. And so we gave a minimum 5% to all employees, but there was about 60% of the employees that we gave over 5% so that they got to at least the minimum, if not higher than that, within their new category based on the classification study. That amounted to, not the 5%, but the extra amount amounted to about $120,000 more that we had to give to bring them up to what we thought was necessary. I think we need to do a better job in that we don't need to wait 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. We need to come up with a merit-type system. And a lot of communities have this where if I'm an employee and I'm starting with Edgefield County today, and if I'm making $20 an hour, next year, the year after that, the year after that, I'm going to be making $20 plus whatever the cost of living is. I'm never going to go up any higher. And we need to find a way, either through merit, cross-training, some other way to bring them off that minimum and bring them up. I'll call it a step process. Usually there's a grade, and we got grades going from, I think it's grade 9 to like grade 40, depending on what your position is. And then within those grades, there should be steps. North Augusta, for an example, within 3 years, I believe, David, they get up to midpoint. Not saying we have to do that, but that is something we should be striving to do. The benefits are important, but everybody wants cash in their pocket. And that's something that we need to look at. There's ways of doing that. We also need to look at, when you hired me as the interim, I was going to say acting, but I'm not a very good actor. So when you hired me as the interim, the plan was in 3 to 4 months, you would replace me with someone else. A year and a half later, I finally said, you either replace me or I'm not going to be here on January 3rd. And we got an excellent administrator here today. Part of the problem is, though, we have individuals that we need to be training up so that when the docs leave and David leaves and Garrett leaves and the sheriff's elected position, but when people are leaving those positions, we got someone already trained and ready to move on up to these new positions. And there's ways of doing that in what I call succession management. We actually started classes, went to Aiken Tech, the employees to learn certain skills. And there's a number of things that we could do to do that succession management. But again, that's part of that, what we're talking about with the county employees. So again, county employees are the lifeblood of this county, and we can't neglect them. Okay, recreation. It may not be as important as public safety. When I talk about public safety, I'm talking about the sheriff, EMS. But recreation is that quality of life issue that the citizens want and need. We do a fairly decent job, and I say fairly decent because I think we could do more, but we do a fairly decent job with the youth. You know, the high schools have stuff, the middle schools have stuff, then we have baseball, we have soccer programs, we have softball programs, we have basketball programs. But then beyond that, you know, if you're not in high school anymore, there's not a whole lot of things for people to do here. There's not a lot of leisure type things. They're starting to, people my age or whatever age you want to call them, they're getting into pickleball. And it's going across the country more and more. You know, but what are we providing for our citizens here for recreation? And there's two different kinds of recreation. There's active recreation, you know, your sports activities, whether it be tennis or pickleball or the baseball or softball or flag football or volleyball, which are typically provided by various governmental entities outside of the school system. And then there's the passive. You know, passive providing like what the seniors do with a group, but you have to be a senior to be basically using that. We don't provide any crafts or other type of activities for individuals that are not involved in that active portion. Is that something we should get into? I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but again, as we grow, as people want more and more services, that's something they're expecting. Now, let me bring up a couple of issues that's involved with that. We have Bettis Park, great park. Got football, got great baseball, got some shelters out there. Most of you know this, but in 2025, I believe that's just 2 years from now, we have a lease on that property. We don't own that property. So, yeah, now we could tear down the fences and whatever else and drag them to another location. But in 2025, there's a consortium of churches that own that property. We knew that when we got it. When I came here in 2011, we wanted to do I can't remember what expansion we were doing at that time. Oh, we were building the shed where Nick works out of, and we wanted to get a grant from the state. At that time, our lease expired in 2017. And so we said, well, we need to extend that lease, and we got it to extend it to 2020. We added 8 more years onto it, or else that lease would have already been up. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. This group could say, we don't want county to be involved in this at all. I mean, that's one scenario. Or they could say, fine, we want you to continue being involved, but we want, I don't know, $50,000 a year to lease that property. Or there might be a hybrid in between. And I would like to think that we'll be able to come up with some kind of compromise to work with it, because no offense, but without the right people, a nice park like that could fall apart very quickly if it's not maintained properly. And so I like to think that we could work something out, but we may not be able to. But also, do we need another park? If you want another park, just to plan it, buy it, locate where you're going to have it, start preparing it, it takes 3 to 5 years to go ahead and do that whole process. I was involved with that when we did what was called Citizens Park. We had 3 pods of baseball, and then we set a big open playing area. But it took over 5 years to go ahead and get to where we wanted to start really playing games. But do we want something more centrally located? What about all that growth on the south side? Maybe we need to partner with North Augusta or some other entity. Maybe we need to go ahead and see if we get a Y in here somewhere. There's all kinds of different directions we go at with recreation. But again, whatever you plan today, you're not going to see the rewards from it for a few more years. So again, that's going to be something we'll talk with the Planning Commission, but it's something for you all to think of. Where does that stand in our priority as far as active recreation versus passive recreation? Do we want to put more trails? Now, we're not involved in it. What's the bike trails called? The ones off of Woodlawn. Oh, fast trails? I thought. Fats. Okay. So we don't have anything to do with that, and thank goodness we don't. But, you know, what other type of, you know, do we want to get some trails? And, I mean, not that we're going to do this, but going from Travelers Rest all the way through Greenville, they have the Rabbit Trail. Thousands of bicycles on it all the time. But again, we have to vision where do we want to go as a county with our recreation. And again, as we talked about these things, every one of them has a price tag on it. And as I said, our growth gives us enough money to basically pay for probably 2.5%, 3% pay increase come this next year. So we need to be creative as to where our funding is going to come from for these various things. So that's recreation. An item that came up with, from one of our employees was a leadership academy. A lot of counties will have a leadership academy where employees from the county, the towns, business people, citizens would gather together once a month, and they go through anywhere from a half a day to a day, visiting industry, learning about their county, learning about state government, and it provides leadership and gives them a much better understanding how government works, how commercial and business works, how development works. Because again, we all think we know everything about it, and I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know that much about a lot of these things, and you only learn by seeing and doing. And so having a leadership academy, you know, would that be done by the county? Could be. Could be a group of citizens that the county appoints to put this together. And this may be something that we want to initiate to bring more leaders forward within this county. But I'll call that the Leadership Academy. Solid waste. Solid waste was one of those items that when we did the budget last March when it was presented to you, the amount of money we're getting in is slowly not covering the cost. And I would say that based on the fact that we gave a nice percentage, but a very small amount of increase to the employees, we added some employees at the Sweetwater Center. And there's more and more cost to go ahead and landfill and get rid of our materials that we have. I'm not too sure if the $100 is going to cover it or not. So again, it's an area that we have to be very creative in knowing where and what are we going to do to provide the services. And again, where are those services mostly needed? On the south side. So the US 25 Park Convenience Center and the Sweetwater ones, we already added more people for weekends. At some point, we either have to enlarge those facilities, or at some point, we're going to have to go ahead and have a new facility added. Obviously, if it's a new facility, you're talking about several hundreds of thousands of dollars. But even expanding those facilities is going to cost some money. Again, that's where that impact fee. We don't need these new facilities if we didn't have more people moving in. We may want to go ahead and look at the hours that we have. Right now, I remember meeting some citizens over at the Georgia Road facility, the one off of Martintown, near Martintown Road. And I was there probably for at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I think I saw 2 people come in. But we have the same hours there as we pretty much have some of these other ones. Maybe we want to reduce the hours at some of these. We need to get a better handle on what's happening at each of the sites. Now, the senior center provides the staffing for it. Ed Lamb heads that up for the senior center. And we can go ahead and determine some of these things, but solid waste is going to become more and more of an issue, especially as we get more and more growth on the south side. The growth that we're getting on the south side, for example, I think is very important. What used to be a $150,000 home is now $250,000, and I don't want to say those are the mid-range, but pretty much that's the mid-range price of a home now. The high-end homes that we were seeing built last year, that's dropping off, and we're seeing more of the mid-range. Just as a point of reference, I think it was in 2004, when I was with the city of Aiken, we did a study and said, what is the average cost of a home as far as what they're going to bring in taxes and fees that will support all of the activities that we're providing? So in other words, you're going to get so much taxes, so much fees, and that's going to equal to break even a certain price of a home. You all follow what I'm saying? Back then, it was about $170,000. So it's probably going to be that any home that's under about $250,000, we probably are not making, we're losing. And anything over $250,000, we get more money in. Now, you make your revenue, again, from commercial and from industrial. But again, we need all kinds of housing. We need apartments that people could go ahead and live in. There's going to be trailers out there. And so I'm not saying that, hey, you turn down anything that's not a certain value of a home. I'm just saying that when we look at home and we see all this growth and, oh, how good it is, there's an expense that goes with it. For every X number of homes, there's going to be that many more EMS needs, so much more recreation, so much more sheriff cars that are going to be needed out there, so many more schools that are going to be needed or expanded in some fashion. So growth is good, but there is a cost that goes along with that growth. When we look at solid waste, 2 or 3 times a year, it seems, there's always that complaint, by gosh, I know that person that's behind me or in front of me is from Aiken County or from Georgia or some other location. I mean, we talked about it, we looked at it. I'm not too sure there's a good solution. If there was, we'd have done it 5 years ago, we'd have done it 10 years ago. But again, it's something that I think requires some discussion. Just so you all know, Randy Dorn is going out there on weekends, not every weekend, not every Saturday, not at the same time, but he'll stay out there for about an hour and he'll check the license registration of all the vehicles and the people that are in it to make sure that they are Edgefield County residents. And that's helped. But again, he didn't find that many. But again, that is always going to be a complaint. When I talked to Clay Killian in Aiken County, he has the same complaint against Edgefield County. All those Edgefield County residents are going down Bettis Academy Road and stopping at that convenience center and putting their trash in our bins. So I don't know if there's more Aiken County versus Edgefield County, but it's going to be an issue. I'm sure we'll talk about it. David and I have talked about it, but I just wanted to mention that because I don't want you to think we've forgotten about it. EMS, probably, and I've saved that to the last 2 towards the end here. EMS is probably the most critical service that we provide. Obviously, it's life and death. And since 2018, the number of calls has increased by 30%. So at one time, we had 2 ambulances. Then we added another ambulance. It was in 2017 or 18. 14? Oh, wow. We're getting close to having to add another ambulance again. So we're looking at all kinds of different scenarios. Right now, when we go to a hospital, we have to wait until that person's accepted at the hospital. My daughter works as an ER nurse, and she said on Monday they were backed up 10 to 14 hours in the ER. So you can imagine we go there with this person, they go in the waiting room because they're not dying, they're just don't feel very well, and they're sitting in a chair and we're waiting to be released. You know, maybe we could do something about that. We have a lot of what we call transports, and all they're going is getting, nothing offensive, but they're going to get a dialysis. It's almost like, could you at least call Uber and have them transport you? So we're looking at, do we go ahead and get non-ambulances, a transport vehicle, with a couple of personnel to do that? So right now we have 3 ambulances. Before we add a 4th one, is there some other things we could do? Can we do transport vehicles? Can we talk to the hospitals? I hate to get into this, but when there's a dead body, we have to pick up dead bodies. And again, if the dead body's been around for a while, it takes a while before you could use that ambulance again. I mean, there's just issues upon issues upon issues. And then when we go ahead and submit for insurance claims or other claims, we only get back about half of what it cost us. So that's again why we have that millage rate. But that millage rate last year did not quite cover all of our costs. And if we can't find some other solutions, that's going to be an area that, if not this year, the following year, somewhere along the line, the new homes that are coming in are not paying for it. Again, because of all the, an ambulance right now, where we were paying about $175,000 a year and a half ago, we paid $200,000 last December. The new one's going to cost us about $250,000. And it's taking us 18 to 24 months before it'll even arrive. So that's why last spring, I said, I know you just purchased a new ambulance, but we need to order one right now because it's going to be another 2 years. We're not alone in this. I mean, other counties are fighting the same thing with EMS, but it's a critical issue. With the growth we're having on the south end, especially in the Sweetwater US 25, we're going to probably have to build a new EMS station. Right now, we're sharing space with Meriwether. We give them a small stipend to help out. I'm not too sure if they want us there or not. They complain about us, but they like us there. It kind of goes both ways depending on the day, and you talk to them. But, maybe we do something outside of that location. Maybe we come up with more of a formal agreement. Maybe we have to expand somehow. But we're going to probably have to go ahead and find a 3rd location for this. Star Road is nice, but it's not in the best location. If we had to do it all over again, we'd probably find a better location than Star Road. A myriad of issues with EMS. David and I have talked about it. In that year and a half I was here, I talked to Garrett almost weekly about issues and what to do and how we could do it better. And I wish there was one way to solve everything. But I do know that transports of non-critical patients is going to be the key, in my opinion. And Garrett could probably tell us, or maybe can't, but what's the percentage of those that are not the emergency type that we'd need an ambulance? There's certain protocol you would have to still follow. You still have to have a medical person there, so if that person in the wheelchair or sitting there, something happened, you could take care of them. And you would need a driver that could be non-medical. But again, just the cost of the vehicle and the amount of equipment and everything else is just so much less. So that's an issue. Last issue, fire. Fire. Don't everybody run out of the building. There's always been this contention, so to speak, between the fire departments. And in, I think it was 2007, then not mayor, just a head of the fire department for the town of Edgefield, Ken Durham, worked together with the various other departments, and they, after about, he said, about a year and a half, they came up with this agreement. Now, fast forward 18 years later, not a thing has changed with that agreement. I like to think we've been evolved a little bit in the last 18 years, and there probably should have been some changes. The way the agreement was worded, rightly so in many ways, it took everybody to agree before any changes could be made. Then COVID hit, and where they were meeting 4 times a year, typically what they did is every fire department, once a quarter, hosted a meal for all the firemen that wanted to come, and then after that meal, they had a board meeting of the fire board. Then COVID hit, and they stopped doing this, and so we got out of whack with having these quarterly meetings that we were having. And so a lot of things are coming up. You've already talked with David about a couple of these, and that's training. You know, we have a number of people that are not trained, and then the ones that are trained, most of them are in their 60s, 70s, and even in their 80s, that are trained that no longer put on an air pack and go in these buildings and fight the fires, because 15, 20 years ago, when you need to get certified, they would meet on Tuesday night for maybe 6 months and they would be certified. Now it's a long, more drawn-out program, and so we're going to be providing some funding to help with that. There's an issue on the north side, not having enough funding. They always need more people, they need trained people, but they also need equipment. One of the things when we hired Foster, who is our emergency management person, I had mentioned to him that I really want him to work for the fire departments. We have 7 departments. Each of them are very similar. Each of them are very different. I said, sometimes it's going to be like herding cats to get them to work together. So that's going to be one of your major roles. The other major roles is there's no one here in the county that can help with grant writing. Meriwether's large enough, and they got a lot of people that were professional firefighters, individuals that they're very good at getting grants. But I'll tell you, these smaller towns and the other departments are not. And so one of the things we have asked Foster to do is to try to help write some grants to get equipment and to get help. So I came across one just yesterday. It was a FEMA grant. And so I thought, oh, great. You know, I work with a couple of towns. I'll go ahead and see what I can do to maybe come up with some grants. Well, into the 80th page of this grant, this is just the instructions. I'm trying to filter through what in the world they wanted. If you ever work with FEMA, it's just a tough agency to work with. But they got money. This last year, in 2022, 36 different fire departments in the state got money from FEMA. It added up to about $6.5 million. Only 10 of them were towns. A couple more counties. You know, the county actually said, hey, let's have a training facility. Let's go ahead and, you know, maybe do pay for some of this training. I don't know what they got the money for, but a couple of counties got, even the state got some money from them. But most of them, the vast majority, about 70%, were small, little fire departments. MODOC. Everybody knows where MODOC is. MODOC got 2 grants last year. They got $837,000 to get a new vehicle. I don't know what kind of vehicle it is, but it sure is a nice one. They got another $72,000 grant for some equipment. Could we work with these fire departments and help put together these FEMA or other grant opportunities? I know like the state forestry comes out with grants. It's a real simple 2-page form. I mean, I can even do that, and I have. But they're limited on what they will allow you to get. You know, they want you to get chaps, and they want you for fighting forest fires, not interior or urban type fires. let's see if there's grant possibilities so that we can go to the north side or the west side or one of these towns and get some grants and get some help for them. And so David and I were talking about today, and a lot of what Foster does is working with FEMA anyways, because they work with emergency management in that area. But we could also talk to people at MoDOT. How did you get this? Maybe one of our representatives, Jeff Duncan, or whoever, could go ahead and assist us, because these are federal grants. But we need to look at all the various resources that are out there. Too often we say, okay, we got these dollars that are here in Edgefield County, and I think for the most part we use them very well, but there's other opportunities, whether it's with Aiken Electric Co-op, whether it's with the state, whether it's working with the Association of Counties or the Upper Savannah COG. We need to look at all the various resources that are there. We got a great relationship right now, for instance, with the school system. For the officers we have, it's an 80-20 split. And then we got 4 other officers that are, I'll call it more semi-private or different type of an issue. And that's closer to 100%. Some of them are 100%. Could we get more of those cooperation? What can we do to work with those fire departments to help them and assist them? Because essentially, even though they're each their own entity, if something major happens, we don't want to see in the paper that maybe there's something we could have done to prevent someone from getting hurt or even dying in a fire. And that's what I know David's been doing with the training, with the first responders. So instead of just giving the fire departments more money, maybe we can find grants that can help them out. Those are the items that we have received from you, from citizens, from staff, department heads, elected officials. Is there any other issue that we want, any other big issue that we want to talk about tonight that we can add to the list? Where I have a question mark out here. If not, we're going to be taking a break.
And then when we come back from the break, you start hearing from.
More questions, and then we're going to go ahead and start talking about what's our high, mid, and lower priority. Just because it's low priority doesn't mean we're not going to do something. It just means that tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock he's not going to start on that project.
All right, then, so what I'd like to do then, Roger, is for council, we're going to call a brief recess, probably 10 minutes or so. This is a working meeting, so I apologize for those of you who are here. We're going to have we're going to be eating right in front of you. So for staff and for council, we got some Subway sandwiches that the clerk is now setting up on the back table here. I ask you to fix it, bring it out here, because in 10 minutes we're going to start back, and we'll just eat and listen, and we know how to talk and eat and all that. So we will do that, and Doc, I'll just say we probably need to pause our broadcast, so it's just not on for the next 10 or 12 minutes. So with that, we'll take a brief recess. We'll be right back.
Yes, we are going to say we need a mirror and a makeup because how am I supposed to fix my makeup and my lipstick?
We're back up and running. So if everybody's purpose, we're getting ready to get back going again.
Doc, did you turn the air down or up? You turn the air
I mean, you
up.
want
It's
it warm.
cold. Yeah, it's cold. Will you make it warmer in here?
We're up and running? Okay, we're up and running, Aretha? Is it not working?
Technical difficulties.
Always? Always?
You don't hear me smoke. Nope.
Just 1 second.
The stream is up.
Make sure we're live so everybody can see you.
They'll say, I want to go be on that kind of council. They eat all the time.
Roger, did you get to eat? Did you get to eat?
Yes.
Did you get to eat?
Eat.
Yeah.
Is that what you guys are doing?
Did you scarf some down?
That's right. That is true. Yeah, I was looking for the cookies.
Dean,
I know, right? I just thought
you're
we'd have
dropping the
cookies.
ball. Dean's been plying us with the desserts. He's dropping the ball here.
We're up and running? Okay. We are up and running, council, so I'm gonna call us back to order from our brief recess. And we're being a little bit informal here because it is a retreat. So we all got our dinners here, which is Subway sandwiches and some chips, so we apologize if we're crunching or eating, but we are paying attention. And so I'm gonna turn it back over to Roger for the next phase of our retreat here, so, Roger.
For the next phase, whether that be 5 minutes or 20 minutes, we'll talk and have an opportunity to discuss some of these items that you have especially some more interest in. So to kind of give a little order to it, let's go ahead and start with the very first one and see what comments or concerns that you might have for the county buildings. To make sure that everybody's on the same page, you all understand what we're talking about with each of these items.
Think so, unless somebody has a question.
Please advertise it correctly when they go up for sale.
You are so not
Or
funny.
for demolition, or whatever.
That's good. Any other comments?
Specifically regarding the sheriff's department, have we talked, I'm thinking we can't salvage that building. I mean, is there any discussion on ways to salvage it or what we could possibly use it for? Because, I mean, I just don't see how there could be any salvaging of that building.
Would you like me to?
Again, we're not going to
I
get
was saying,
into
I don't wanna solve it
specifics
tonight.
on this,
Right.
but
Have we,
as part of the process, in the next year and a half that we have, we'll be going through each of those buildings, maybe even bring some others that are more attuned to possible offices or something else to look at it, to see if there is some value to it. But again, for us to make an opinion or to look at it right now and say, oh yeah, we think we do this, this, and this, again, that's not what we're here to really discuss.
Could I add something, Roger? I formed a working group. We are going through each of the buildings, and basically what we're gonna do is assess the basic condition and then brainstorm possible uses.
perfect.
And we're gonna present that to council, not as any agenda-driven thing. This is what we wanna do, but what the building's appropriate to use for, and whether it's even salvageable or worth doing.
I guess that's my question, is what buildings would be salvaged, what do we have to really work with? But I like that, thank you.
The courthouse annex is good and the magistrate's building's good. We haven't gone through the sheriff's offices.
The major one that we are concerned about right now is the Edgefield building, because a decision will have to be made in the next few months concerning this building in relationship to that building.
Do we know when this building is going to be, when we're gonna be able to make that decision?
We are waiting on a response from the owner and his attorney right now. We've taken the steps required by us, so we're just waiting to hear back.
They appraised it, we appraised it. Obviously, there's differences in the appraisal values, and then there's a formula that the lease agreement had on it. And so, based on the lease agreement and the appraisals that we have, we know what that number should be for this building. They're not real happy with it.
There is the potential that they could force a third appraisal, and I'm not sure if that's where they're moving.
But we've been working with that person probably for 4 or 5 months now. So it's a slow process, but again, part of our decision making is that county council is probably doing on that.
Right, at least if they can't come to an agreement with us, then we have an option. So, and that's not a bad option.
Okay?
I have received some thoughts, and they're meeting, I believe, on the 12th, and they'll be discussing this upcoming meeting. And then I'll be sending an email out to council this week to ask for their input as well.
We will come in that meeting with probably 4 or 5 items. But at that meeting, there may generate 3 or 4 more items. And again, we'll have to look at that and say, well, what's going to be the number one thing that we look at, number 2, number 3. If you recall back in 2021, one of the big issues was solar farms. And so it, you know, and then we went, after that, the next year, we talked about recreation and some of the other activities. But again, I like to think of the planning commission for just what it does. It's a planning body, not just a regulatory body. And they tend to be, look at things from a regulatory, oh, we can approve this, we can't approve this, we need to change here. Let's start looking towards the future, 3 to 5 years from now, as to where and what they want to see within the county.
The one thing I would add under development, I mean residential development, we're going to talk to them about is, I want to talk a little bit about the philosophical part of development, meaning that, and I'll look to Doc on this, on the topic of major subdivisions, and if I'm not mistaken, Doc, major subdivision is defined as what, 10 units or more, right?
So we recently changed that in our last rewrite, so it's now 5 or more lots that don't meet the requirements of the state law for exempt subdivisions.
All right, so in discussing it, you know, so major sounds like we're talking about hundreds, and major is now 5 or more. But my point is, I want to make sure that we are addressing any concerns, particularly the citizens have, obviously, who live around subdivisions, that we have the right, I'll just say the right ordinances in place that either they are right and we're all happy, or they're not right and they need to be overhauled, or they're good but need to be tweaked, or whatever it is in terms of how big are lots, and water and sewer, and all the things that go with it. So I just want to make sure we have, I personally want to make sure we have that discussion, because that keeps coming up.
Right.
About how big is a subdivision and how much land does it take up. And, you know, we went through some of this recently with a couple of developers here, and one backed out. So just in talking about that, I like to do that, because I think it helps refresh everything to make sure we're on the right track, is all I'm saying.
Also for council and for the planning commission, everybody needs to realize that the document we have is zone ordinances that we put together last year and approved. That should be a living, breathing document. That's not cast in stone. Every 10 years you go through a major update, but every year there should probably be some changes to it. And just as you were stating, when we were going through that document, we made several major things to not have the density in some of those developments. Well, let's look at it again. Maybe there's certain things we want to continue with that, maybe everything. Maybe we want to make some changes, or maybe it's some changes that we want to make based on particular zones or areas of the county. If you were in a city, like North Augusta or Aiken, you would have actually particular areas of the city that are zoned for higher density versus less density. And, you know, we decided to have about 80% of our county not zoned. So again, even though we set zoning up for all areas of the county last year, along the major thoroughfares and on the south side, we should be looking at that continually. We should be looking at highway overlays, and how we want to develop those, encourage those, or change those. So again, think about what you're hearing from folks, so in 2 weeks we'll have the same exact type of formula.
If I can say one more thing, Roger, for clarification, I'm not talking about additional zoning. I'm talking about major subdivisions as they currently exist.
Thank you for
So-
clarifying that.
So, and I'm not really talking about comprehensive plan, I'm talking about just zoning ordinances, and so one other quick example, I'll make this up, this is not accurate, and it does not meet the definition that that we know of the acreage, but let's pretend that today you could put 100 homes on 50 lots. Let's just pretend for a moment. Maybe we say that's perfect. Maybe we say it ought to be only 20 homes on 50 lots. Maybe it ought to be 300 homes on 50 lots. I'm just saying there are things like that we ought to look at density-wise to see based on water and sewer and what's available at those particular places and where they're zoned, just so we all can get on the same page with that is kind of where I'm going with that, Roger.
Economic development.
Well, like I said, just one quick thing about that. Most people don't realize one small to medium-sized industry can give you more tax money than a 500 housing unit subdivision. I mean, and think about that for a minute. Industries don't draw near the resources that rooftops do and families do. And they don't draw on the school system, if you will. Now, yes, some people move here for jobs and all that, I understand that. But I'm just saying the industry itself and the people they hire are not a drain on our resources, but they contribute a lot in tax money. So while economic development has its own issues and challenges, those are usually winners' problems. Those are the problems you want to have to solve. They're winners' problems. But, you know, if we look at residential for economic development in the sense of economic development, and it is in a sense, just remember that industry is just a whole lot easier and commercial businesses are a whole lot easier for all of us to deal with because not many people argue with an industry going to the industrial park. So just keep that up.
The caveat, of course, to that is industries won't come to Edgefield County if they don't have employees to employ, or commercial businesses are not going to come in if they don't have the residential density required to meet their needs.
Right.
For instance, you're not getting a Chick-fil-A in Edgefield County. Sorry, there's nowhere you can draw a circle on a map and get enough rooftops to get a Chick-fil-A to come here. And there's a lot of calculations involved in how these businesses and commercial entities do that. So residential growth is part of the calculation that has to be made when you're talking commercial and industry. You may not know it, but Edgefield County has one of the lowest unemployment rates anywhere. We have extremely low unemployment. And most people would say, oh, that's a great thing. We have really low unemployment. But when an industry is scoping us out, they go, y'all are 99% employed. And that's a detriment to recruiting efforts sometimes. So that's just something that you have to factor into that.
As the chairman stated, think about Generac and what it brought to this county. And hopefully they're going to go ahead with the expansion sometime in the near future. It's already been set up, we already got the infrastructure in place, but it was just an empty building. Now, saying, you know, we're always looking for new industry, but 85 to 90% of your growth in industrial is with existing industries. So you want to go ahead and make sure that the existing industries, their needs are met. And I know that one of the things our chairman has done in the past is gone ahead and visited with every plant manager in the county. And I think you're still doing that.
I am.
On a yearly basis. Now, what can we do for you? What are your needs? Is there something we can help you with? But so much of their needs is making sure our workforce is educated. And that's always been a problem. There's more people coming into the county than going out as far as, you know, like Generac, probably 70% of the people that work at Generac are not Edgefield County residents. So again, we need to make sure we have an educated workforce. There's just all kinds of things. We just can't drop the ball. And we need to find ways to maybe do even more work with them. And maybe that's something where we want to have a work session with Rudolph. I know there's a group that meets
quarterly.
quarterly now. But once a year to meet with him and ask those questions, and he can talk about it more.
Spoiler alert, Will's coming to our February meeting as a guest speaker.
The other thing is, I remember, I think it was in 2015, we met with the CTC. And it was really an eye-opening meeting. As much as I knew about the CTT and senator meetings, it was a great exchange. We had the person from the state come on down, Cooper was the guy at the time, and Herb laid out a great path forward. And a lot of the misconceptions we have concerning road building and how to get things done. There's certain formulas and certain things, and so we had a great, frank, and honest discussion with the CTC. And so every once in a while, and I know we, in the past, at least while I was here last year and a half, we didn't have a lot of these extra meetings. And I'm not saying we need to have more of it, but I guess I am saying we should have some of these meetings with folks.
Well, just real quick, second spoiler alert. I talked to Sam Crouch, and Sam and I are trying to get a joint meeting scheduled for probably March.
Any more spoiler alerts, just go ahead and put them out there now.
So, is there any other meetings you?
Yeah,
some
just.
spoiler alerts before
That was it.
How my brilliance is just going out.
I listened to
There
you.
wasn't very much there.
See, we listened to you.
Okay, anything else on economic development? Okay, county staff. David, did you want to say anything more about county staff that I didn't mention before?
No, I think I've outlined it pretty well to council, but I just to go back to what Roger spoke about on merit pay or a STEP program, that is also a recruiting tool for new staff. If you can point to some type of metric that, hey, if you come here, you've worked 2 years, you've passed your evaluations, here's where you'll be. In 4 years, here's where you'll be. And that's notwithstanding any cost of living increase. That would be a separate movement within the pay bands. And I just think that is so important to recruiting people, because if you hire an employee and he's been here 4 years, and then a new coworker is hired in the same position next to him for the same pay with no experience whatsoever, that's a demotivating factor. So I do believe we should really push to implement a STEP program here.
And if I can make just one comment on that, I want to be cautious. I agree with you 100%, but to do a merit increase, you have to have a reason for merit. So you have to have a program where people are getting performance reviews or something to say why they're getting the merit pay.
That is correct. If you implement a STEP program, you must implement an employee evaluation program. Those go hand in hand.
So which means all department heads would have to do it. I mean, it'd have to be countywide. Everybody'd have to be able to do it.
That is correct. Now, it doesn't need to be overly complex
Right.
in language that doesn't apply to the position, but there needs to be a basic evaluation program.
Which kind of seems like that should be going on anyway. Kind of seems like that should be going on anyway.
Goals for those employees, you'd be setting goals for the department heads, elected officials would be setting goals for them, and if an employee doesn't meet those goals, then obviously that's a great conversation starter.
Kind of seems like that should be going on anyway. I mean, it seems like we should be doing that.
I understand and I agree with you, it just hasn't been done, but if you're gonna do it, I would recommend that there be some reward for those. There's nothing worse than having, and I'll pick on either here or Jason here, when you got other deputies there, or you got other paramedics or whoever, and you start comparing one to one. Not everybody's the same.
Yes, sir.
Some do a better job than other people do. But if you all get the same cost of living increase, what's the incentive for doing more, better? And I found that the merit system, because we implemented this a long time ago in Aiken, it does make a difference. You know, some people got 2 or 3% increase. Some people I made sure got no increase. And if you got less than 1%, you better start either preparing your resume or making some changes in your life.
Roger, and just for your peace of mind, Tiffany, individual department heads, we do performance reviews on our employees for internal purpose use. It just is not, I'm sure the sheriff office has one, I'm sure Garrett has one, I certainly have one. But it's just not used on a countywide basis. So, for instance, my performance reviews are not going to David. David may do a performance review on me for his own internal purposes, but that review is not coming to you. It's staying with him. And just like when I do my review for my people in my office, I'm using that for my own internal purposes. I'm not passing that along.
And Doc is exactly correct on that, but what we would need to do is standardize it so there would be the same numerical scale and so forth, and we could compare apples to apples. So if council moves in that direction, then we will develop a program like that.
Roger, it hadn't been mentioned, but I think employee appreciation every quarter.
I was just about to say, say something about that.
Has that been officially implemented? I know we talked about it numerous times and between y'all two.
So I have a working group on employee compensation and recognition, and some of these things were developed as Roger was nearing the end of his tenure here, and we are going to put those in place very soon. You'll see an update on it shortly.
And also I'd like to see us do something to recognize our retiring employees as well. I do. I think we have some who have given their entire careers, their entire lives to this county, and I think we need to recognize and honor them. And we're not doing that.
I think that's a great idea.
And I think we need to do that, and I'd like to see that implemented some kind of way.
And again, all these things can and are possible. Putting together employee evaluation system, done that in a number of different towns, and it's been fairly successful. The recognition program, the foundation is there. Unfortunately, we just need to go ahead and put a little flyer underneath some of the department heads, elected officials to start recognizing people. But we have the awards were already approved and in place. It's just a matter of getting it implemented. And Dave's correct. I was kind of leaving, he's coming in. But again, if that's going to be one of your high priorities, then you'll spend even more effort on it versus other things, which is what we're trying to do today. Okay, the next thing is recreation 2025.
What's the percentage that we may lose that lease in 2025? Anybody know?
It's so hard to say. I think that, the lease is there, and I believe that there's going to have to be a lot of discussion with these folks. And unfortunately, the group that we were discussing with is ad hoc. I mean, it's not like, these are the three individuals you need to talk to.
Right.
It encompasses lots of individuals, and I'm sure they all have different opinions.
Probably about 14 churches or more.
It's even more than 14.
But I think one of the main thing is they need to realize if we leave, the money leaves with us as far as keeping it up. And that's my opinion.
And the maintenance that goes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of expense that goes in to just keep the lights up and everything else. Insurance.
Would they, I'm just curious because I don't know, and so this is something that they may need to consider. We apply for the PARD grants that have been able to get us most of everything we have out there. Would they then be entitled to some grants or to some, so they would be on their own as far as putting, okay.
Yeah, they be on some island.
They need
on
to
their
realize,
own.
I
yeah,
think
I
that
mean-
point needs to be very well spoken to them in the discussion.
And again, this is,
Articulated, yeah.
we still have time, but in May 2025, that's the deadline. So we got a couple of years, and a lot's going to happen in between that time. But again, I put that as an emphasis that maybe we should be doing something a year or 2 years ago. But
That's true.
it's now getting closer. We don't want to wait till April of 2025 to start having these discussions.
Well, and I just want to point out too on that topic is that if we are, it's easy to say, we want to get out of the lease, we're not going to renew it. I mean, it takes a pen and paper and you're done. It's easy. The hard part is creating a new recreation park. It will be, not quite, but almost to the level of trying to build a new law enforcement center.
That's right.
You gotta have land, you gotta have tons of money.
But that's
No
why we
recreation
need
is
to
cheap.
start, I mean, that has to be a priority now, because we've known for a long time that the baddest thing has been, as long as I've been covering council, that has been a prickly subject. And there are a lot of people who do not like us putting money in a thing that we do not own. A property that we do not own, and that's always,
That's been top discussion.
right, and so it's our time now to stand on this and do something better and to move us in a path forward now.
And that's just one issue, though. You gotta understand that there's other things that we need to be thinking about. Right now, we share fields with Edgefield, we share fields with Johnston. We help provide some funding for power and things of that nature. But how do we move forward even with those towns? What kind of programs do we want to have in the future? You just approved, I think, $160,000 last week to the town of Edgefield for their
Gym.
activity center. It's no longer be called a gym, it's an activity center, and we call it an activity center for a reason. We don't want it to be just a gym.
Right.
We want it to have lots of activities, and by providing heat and air, then you won't have to just have basketball, and maybe basketball being played in 50-degree indoor temperatures. You could have volleyball or pickleball or other activities where it could be rented out, where there will be chairs and tables, and it'd be a great community center for everybody. So how do we enter into that relationship with the town of Edgefield, short and long term? Doctor and I were talking about a kind of a prickly situation with another town that I work with and their gymnasium that they're fixing up. And do we enter into some kind of a relationship with the town of Trenton and how that is going to be used in the future? In the past, they said, it's our gym, it's our rules, it's our balls. But that's how it's going to stay. Now that we're making improvements into it, what can we do to work with them to maybe get some other opportunities? If you haven't ever been in that gym, what a beautiful facility. There's a film called Hoosiers that was made probably about 25 years ago about basketball. This gym looks just like that gym. I mean, it's got the wooden frame ceiling and the bleachers and beautiful, beautiful facility with a nice stage on it. Could be used for all kinds of things. We just need to find a way to get into an agreement with the town. Same thing with Johnston. But how can we utilize some of the facilities and the fields that are there now? And then do we need to start looking towards the future? Or are we going to let everybody that moves into Edgefield County on the south side just go to North Augusta? That's where you're going to have all your recreational programs. Because pretty much that's what's happening now. Everybody that lives down there, they go to North Augusta. And they have to pay outside fees to do that.
And PC met several months ago, and one of the things they did discuss was recreation. They had a long discussion regarding the needs there. And the thing that I remember most from that discussion was not centered around the youth, because that seems to be well-developed. It was more, what can we do for the other demographics in our
They
county?
would like to see a community center with more rentable activity space.
Right. Classes, dance classes, different things to, right.
Just rentable space, because Edgefield County has several buildings that we do rent out. But Aretha can tell you, they stay booked. I mean, months in advance. There's just not a lot of rental space in Edgefield County. Even if it's just a day-long event, you might be 3 months to get a rental. So that's one thing that the Planning Commission saw as something that would pay for itself. We could put up a recreational facility and then rent the spaces out inside of it for a fee, and eventually the building would pay for itself. Now, of course, buildings never pay for themselves under that sort of scenario, but eventually it would recover its costs over time.
Let me just say something, because we did lots of studies on that. Activity center, recreation facility, community center, whatever you want to call it, will never pay for itself. It's a quality of life issue, though, and it's something that's necessary, but you can't, your rents can't cover everything. Because again, when you start talking about covering things, you have to talk about the roof that's going to be replaced in 20 years. You have to talk about the painting. I'm just, it's not just, if all you're looking at is electricity and the gas and the water that's there, yeah, it'll pay for it. But then there's all these other costs that we just don't think about. Like, first of all, an activity center is gonna cost probably a couple $1 million to build. Once it's built, then it'll cover those O&M costs. But again, it's a quality of life issue, and more people want to go to a community that has those quality of life things available to them, just like all of us do. Next one is the Leadership Academy.
Major, I think that was, did we cover everything pretty good a while ago? You got anything to add to this?
I just think it's critical to developing future leaders to take positions y'all have now to positions that we have within county government. It helps the youth and the people that are homebodies that want to stay here and work in our county throughout their careers. Give them some goals and insight into what government is. I can tell you that I've learned more in the last 2 years about how government functions and operates from Mr. Ledoux and y'all than I did not have knowledge of prior, and may be beneficial to somebody younger in their career.
You know, and along those lines, people may remember this, that in the 1990s, well, the 80s and 90s, and maybe through the early 2000s, Clemson Extension used to offer a 9-month, and I did that in the 1990s. I was one of their classes, and others may have participated, I don't know. But, and they did that for people who just want to learn more about government, and they have different pieces, and it lasted like 6 months. It was one night for 6 months. Eventually they stopped doing it because interest died out. So it hadn't been around in a while. So I'm hoping, I think it's a great thing. I hope interest is there and people want to do it, because it does help you understand as a citizen how things work, and that helps you better communicate with your elected officials too.
Now, there is the National Association of Counties Leadership Academy. Both Garrett and I are graduates of that. But that being said, it is not really about what David does every day, or what a county council person does every day, or what the average police officer does every day. It is a bird's eye view of issues that governments face. It is more for people at y'all's level or administration staff level than it is for a regular employee starting their career, or a citizen that wants to be more in the know. So it would also depend on the level of education that you're looking for, I guess.
And this academy will focus on Edgefield County. So the central focus on Edgefield County. It still gets into the governmental and private and industries, but it's focused on Edgefield County. Okay. Solid waste. Kind of a trashy thing.
Well, I can speak, and I know Mr. Talbot can too. He and I have been on these committees to deal with solid waste for the last, dozen years or so, at least almost. He serves as the vice chairman of the Tri-County Solid Waste Authority. That's the 3 counties, Saluda, McCormick, and Edgefield, that come together and empty out the convenience centers and all that, and then they handle other trash and some garbage and such. And it goes to Three Rivers Landfill, and I'm on that board. That's, I forget how many acres now, but it's enough acreage on the Savannah River site that the 9 counties involved can have trash disposal for the next 100 years. And that is a very big deal. Trash is always an issue, And I hope that 100 years from now, we won't have any. There'll be a way to figure it out. We don't have any more trash. Everything will be disposed of immediately and you poof. But today, trash is an issue. And there are counties in South Carolina that can't recruit industries because they have no place to put their trash, because they've produced too much trash to be put in their landfills. So we're fortunate in that, but it does come at a cost. And Mr. Talbot can tell you, and I can tell you, we see the things, we can't believe how much it costs to deal with garbage because of all the regulations. Federal, state, there's just tons of regulations on how you have to deal with garbage. Just simple household garbage. And it's just wildly expensive to be able to do all the things you have to do. So that's why the price goes up. You would think, trash, just throw it away. How hard is this? It's hard.
They're not recycling.
Our cost to try
Right now, we don't do anything.
solid waste went up 25% in this last budget year. We were like 360 and we went up to like 480. And I questioned, and I said, gosh, he said, well, that's just based on the tonnage that you got coming to us.
That's right.
And the costs going up in general that they have, fuel and labor and everything else that is involved. But we went up 25%. I'll tell you, we didn't get 25% more revenue from all these new residents.
Well, and just as a quick note on that, COVID was believe it or not, a driver, because when people couldn't work, what they do, they stayed home and worked on their homes and their yards, and they threw things out. And for like 2.5 years now, there's been this giant wave of garbage that we've never seen before.
Still going on.
Yeah, and it's still going on. And-
Still beside the road.
So that's solid waste. Any other comments, questions?
I just have, for you two, is there any talk of starting the recycling back? I mean, do they look to start that again?
Anything from Jay?
Go ahead, Jay.
Talking to
Left.
Jay, they
He's-
can't get rid of recyclables. They have
I
to
know.
pay someone
Yeah.
to take the recyclables.
It is,
I
it
knew we
used,
weren't recycling, but I just wondered if we were going, would it ever start back?
yeah, what people don't realize is probably now, gosh, maybe it's 2 years ago now, but a year and a half, 2 years ago, China said, we will not take recycling from anywhere else in the world. They will only deal with their own. And when they did that, all of us in the world shipped our recycling to China for the most part. And when they did it, it really backed up all the recycling. And when it backed it up, the price for cardboard and steel and aluminum and all that just plummeted because the supply was so high. So nobody can recycle now and make any money, so they
I just
can't.
think we'd set that up here somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there is some recycling in the country, but it's not much.
Yeah, seemed like you would tap into that, but, okay, sorry.
Those Chinese.
Yeah.
Wow.
EMS.
I've talked to Garrett numerous times, and he's got some good ideas about where the substation's gonna go or the new station. And I talked to the sheriff a few minutes ago. He would very much like to be involved in the building of the next station, because making a multi-purpose station. And he just mentioned to me that the magistrates are very interested in putting a magistrate in the lower end of the county. And this would be paid for, not the building, but the magistrate would be paid for by under Shane Massey's department. So, but he would like to be involved in making a multi-purpose building for many years to come. Because Aiken County, they've got magistrates spread out, and he thinks personally that the growth is enough down there to warrant a magistrate, and this came to him from the magistrate himself. So.
Well, and I guess my only comment to that, Mr. Moody, is that I just want to make sure, I mean, we all know where the growth is, no question, the lower end of the county, 100%. But I just want to make sure wherever we decide to set up, whether it's EMS substations, relocating the main station, combining fire with EMS and with the magistrate and whomever, whatever we want to do, I just want to make sure it's not based, I'm going to call it on politics, meaning just because any of the five of us have a loud voice shouldn't mean that it goes in our area. I want to make sure we look at all the statistics. I want to see where all the EMS calls are. I want to see where.
Garrett's been telling me about that. We don't know where it's going. He doesn't know where it's going.
So I want to see, and as best we can predict the future, you know what I mean? If we see that, again, the lower end of the county over the next 10 years is going to grow exponentially, and we can figure that out somehow, then, without a crystal ball, then maybe we want to put it even closer there. But if it looks like other parts of the county are growing, we might want to think, well, where would we position the county to handle the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time for all emergency-related things? So I just want to make sure we're doing the right things in terms of studying it before we spend money on it, is all I'm saying.
Mr. Chairman, on the EMS issue, we are developing a call map that will show where all the call density is in relation to the current stations. And that will help us make that informed decision that you're talking about. So as soon as we get that map developed, we'll provide it to council. And that'll be sort of a driver for discussion of what locations might fit, and how we might reallocate resources. But that is very important to know where the call volume is.
And it is important, but for instance, I would hope we would talk to the school district and say, if you build another school, where will it go?
That's correct.
And things like that we can get a handle on, just various parts of the community, what things are happening, just to make sure we cover the waterfront as best we can.
Absolutely.
I can tell you where they're not. The call volume's not. We just throw them in the car and take them ourselves, but I'm just saying. But anyway, I did want to ask, how do we charge for the transports?
So whenever we go to a 911 call, we will collect that patient's insurance information. We send that to our billing agency. So we have a set fee that we charge.
So the transports that we mentioned we were doing that were non-emergency, like they're not, like we're taking them, are we taking them like dialysis or something like that? Those type transports, what, those?
And I had a conversation yesterday, he kind of asked, what we provide now is strictly just the 911 side. We do some transports for the hospital, but we strictly only answer if somebody calls 911. What he had asked me about was there any way that we can maybe tap into some of that non-emergency, so the dialysis patient, nursing home. I'm kind of mixed about it. If we're looking at it for revenue side, there's potential there. But obviously there's staff we have to hire, equipment. There'd be an overhead cost to just provide that service alone. And I haven't done all the number crunching, but I would like to say that I would like to focus on make sure we provide an adequate 911 service. Then maybe potentially look at that. Right now we have private services. So for example, most of the dialysis clinics are on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So there's already private services that already handle that.
Okay.
I don't want to kick them out. We just don't have the resources to provide them.
Right, that was my question. I wanted to make sure we weren't dividing our resources for that purpose, but you're telling me that we're not, so.
And like the nursing home, when they have scheduled doctor's appointments, there's somebody that comes and gets them.
Gotcha.
We have gotten a better relationship worked out with the hospital to handle those non-emergent transports. It's a lot better than it was. We've got a lot better relationship with them. We still provide that service when it really is emergency.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there are some, like maybe we say, for example, maybe Aiken County has agreements with certain hospitals that when they come, their patients get straight on in, and we have to wait, correct?
Something new that has just developed with them. The issue of wait times is nothing. This is not a South Carolina problem. This is a nationwide problem. It only got compounded by COVID, and it's actually made it worse since COVID. It's kind of gone back to normal life. People have more comorbidities are now seeking out emergency care. What they developed is they got with a group of lawyers, and it really comes down to verbiage and interpretation of when that care transfers. They were able to find it, get their support of their attorney, the county administrator, all their staff, and they transport patients to the hospital.
I'm sorry, but you really need to speak into the mic.
Sorry, Garrett.
When they transport patients to the hospital, they have a policy in place that gets them in and out the door. I've talked with the director over in Aiken when they first started this. And I really wanted to kind of see how it played out, because I didn't know if this was going to turn around and kind of fail on them, and they were going to be back to where they were. So far, it's been successful. I've talked with Dr. Washburn about, because we'll need his input on this as well. I think we can come to a resolution for it, because it's just as important that our ambulances get back to
Exactly.
the county to serve, just like it is any other county, so.
Exactly.
We need to move on to the next item.
Okay. Thank you, Garrett.
Last one is fire. Comments on that?
I attended the fire board meeting last night, and the idea about cooperation, I saw full cooperation last night. So I think that bridge has been mended or taken care of, or whatever you want to call it. I think all of them on the same page as far as part of the funding process. I think there's some little details that have to be worked out on what they decided last night. So we'll have to discuss that at a later date and just say exactly which plan they're gonna go with. But I think the cooperation is there, and all of them want to help each other out.
That's
Just so
great.
you know that last year, I believe I commented to you all in some issues and updates that there was a citizen that had a lot of concerns and issues with the various fire departments. In talking to Tracy Freeman, who's over the fire board, Tracy has gotten together with that individual, and instead of trying to fight all this stuff, he's asked them to come in and join and to try to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
And
I think
I'll add one more thing to that. Some of the things that are being said are being broadcast as a liability, and I think it's confused for requirements. ISO has certain requirements, but necessarily if they aren't met, it's not necessarily a liability. So I think those two are getting confused, and he's putting it out there like it's a liability on us, but really it's lack of requirement for ISO. So be careful what you read out there.
You have to be careful, but again, if there was ever a tragedy,
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
you can all point fingers, but it's, again, everything stops back at the county level. We're the ones that do the revenue source of giving out to various departments. And so even though we're not responsible, we're part of the solution.
And
I'm
I
not
would-
saying we're part of the problem, we're part of the solution.
And
I would
I'd
also like to say that I was at the fire board meeting as well. This is my third fire board meeting, and the change has been drastic. And I saw some of you, kind of look around when Councilman Moody says there was a spirit of cooperation. There was last night, and they are working together. They are at least working to come to consensus on some issues, so that's a very positive development.
Well, I would like to say that I really appreciate you all working on it, 'cause I remember Roger and I had a long conversation on it throughout, and it seemed like, I'm told him, Roger, that it seemed like it should be ironed out without a whole lot of complication. And I'm glad to know that it's getting resolved,
It still has a ways to go.
Right.
And there's still some hurdles. As much as everybody cooperates in a public meeting, then they go back to their mayor,
Right.
they go back to their councils, they go back to the rest of the firemen. But it's moving in the right direction.
Right, right.
Where I can tell you that when we met this spring, it
Sure,
was not.
yes, yes.
So a lot of things are being done behind the scenes to get us to where we're at today.
Great.
And David's got a good handle on it. The reason it wasn't going well back then was because you're an administrator, you got a new
Okay.
administrator.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Todd, did you want to say
And
something?
just as a part of the explanation, ISO has a lot of recommendations, books of them. And while the ISO does not have a lot of mandatory requirements, you get a score based on how well you're meeting their recommendations. For those of you that don't know exactly what ISO is, that sets the interest rates for insurance rates on homes, commercial businesses, industries, etc. So the worse we score, the higher a private homeowner's insurance goes. So it's important to meet as many of those recommendations of ISO as possible to keep the insurance rates on people's homes as low as possible. And it's not just the fire departments. building departments get rated. I'm sure police have something similar to ISO that they have to work with. I have no idea about EMS, but ISO affects a lot of things. And for instance, I moved the building department by following their recommendation. I improved our score by 1 point, and it made a 3.5% difference in insurance rates in Edgefield County. And that's just a single point. So if you did that across the board with all of the different ISO branches, you could make a 10% difference just by moving them all 1 point. So, I mean, it is something to take seriously.
And part of the problem with ISO rating is half the score is based on water supply. You don't have fire hydrants out there, right off, about half your score goes out the window. Because you have to go ahead and transport your water, and if there's a major fire, it's hard to get water to your site. So anyways, that's a whole, we can go into that for a long time. Any other things on the fire? Now is your turn to start saying what ones are we gonna go ahead and put priority on. So again, if we look at high, medium, and low, kind of look at your page that you have in front of you, so you have an idea, so you're not gonna, don't look at those pages. Do you have any extra pages?
Do we have to give these back to you?
Just a couple of them. Jackie wrote all over.
Are we giving these back to him?
I don't know. I thought,
You want these back? We didn't know it was a
No, no.
quiz.
I'm giving her a blank page so she could actually see what she's gonna
Oh.
be marking down.
Yeah,
Oh.
we can't see nothing. Jackie can't see hers at all.
so it is verbally in a minute, right? We won't tell
Yeah,
you.
we're
Not a pop
but
quiz.
just kind of look at it, maybe make a little list yourself before we start going.
How many can we put in high, how many in medium, and how many in low?
Try to get about 3 of each. There's 9 of them here, so if you said.
Oh, you
3
want high?
Because again, you're gonna look at this, and you're gonna get 7 or 8 high ones.
I might want to change
And
mine
poor
after a
David
while.
can't do that.
I'm gonna do high, mid, HML. Is that what you're doing?
So we're doing HTML.
Okay. Mm, 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 mm. Back on my notes.
And Roger, while people are filling these out too and thinking through it, these are, we're not saying we're not doing something if we put it low. It just means from a priority standpoint, the administrator's probably gonna start with the high stuff first, but he's also gonna do the medium and the low. It's just a matter of timing and what's hot at the moment. For example, the future of county-owned business, county-owned buildings is not extremely important today, but it will be important a year from now. You know, but something else on the list may be important today, but won't be as important if we can figure it out a year from now, you know, for example.
That is correct, and each issue, whether you mark it high or medium, will have a short-term and a long-term component to it. So we will engage on the high rated issues first, but there'll be components of each that will take longer, and we'll develop that out in the strategic plan that council will review and comment on and consider.
Thank you.
And a year from now, what might be low, might be high, what's high might be low.
That's
That's
right.
what I was thinking too.
So,
I might try to get one.
county buildings, high, medium, low,
What is it?
County
County
buildings, no.
or the first one.
I put H.
Anybody have it as a high?
I have it high.
Okay, got one here for high. Anybody medium? Low?
Have a low.
Sorry, Mr. Albert.
Important, but low.
Okay.
You gonna buy one?
Okay.
Developers,
As in residential.
That's a medium.
any highs? One high? Medium? A couple mediums, then I take 2 lows.
Yeah.
Okay, economic development? High,
I got high.
High.
3 highs,
I kind of felt like it was taking care of itself a
any
little bit,
mediums?
so.
1, and then.
Mine was
your-
low because I just kind of feel like it was taking care of
And your
itself in a
low?
lot of ways, but maybe I was wrong.
3, 1, 1. County staff, high,
Mine was high.
I got a meal.
3 mediums, and then 2 lows.
Sorry, Jason.
Keep up your, gotta keep up your mouth. Okay, we're on solid waste, high, 1 high, any mediums, 2 mediums, and then 2 lows. 1, 2, 2. EMS, high. Garrett, you're a winner.
We can talk so much about EMS, I just say hi.
Okay, and then fire, high.
I put medium/low.
Okay, 3 highs
Medium.
That'll
and
be a medium.
3, 1, 3, 2, and 1.
Why should medium/low?
Got all that, Mr. Administrator?
I do.
So obviously, the EMS, county staff would be 2 of our higher ones, followed probably by the fire.
And economic development, they're all pretty much.
Yeah, economic development. So we have 3 to 4, and as David said, you know, we have talked about all these things. You know, it's not like, oh, this is something new, he hasn't ever heard of. Leadership Academy was a new one. I'll have to admit on that one. But, you know, there will be some work along all these, but the concentration will be on the fire, the EMS, county staff, and economic development. Now, when we start talking 2 weeks, then we're gonna be putting some pressure on the planning commission as to what we think should be some of their highs and lows on some of this also. Any final comments from council or the chairman?
Anything final from council before we adjourn?
I think we accomplished a lot tonight, you know.
Thank you, Roger, for leading us through that. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Coming out of
Thanks
retirement.
So much.
Thanks for coming out of retirement for a night. I know, right?
All
I
right,
need to slow down.
if there's nothing else from council, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ms. Ireland makes a motion, Mr. Talbot seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Nobody's gonna argue, right?